2 people in the house, 1 person's dead. How could that possibly happen?
Some people march to the beat of their own drum.
This was a warped relationship between the two of them.
Others are simply out of step.
That man was a monster.
But how do you avoid
Anybody who got in our way
the self-destructive world
was gonna pay for it.
of the deluded? As a former FBI profiler, I'm often asked, can you spot a killer? Is it a look, an attitude, a pattern of behavior? After 40 years' experience, I can say it's complicated. But there's one thing I know. There is a deadly type. The course of Melissa Harris's life is set early, back in high school.
What kind of student were you?
I was a good student. One of my first aspirations was to be a lawyer.
Instead, Melissa ends up here, at the Lowell Correctional Institution in Florida, serving a life sentence as a convicted murderer. Her troubles begin at age 27 when she meets smooth-talking bad boy Earl Lall.
I definitely went too quick. The time we met to the time we were living together, it was probably a couple months.
And that's when she learns Earl is deluded. He's a white supremacist and doomsday prepper and wants to move Melissa and her 3 children to a remote survivalist camp. She tells him that's not possible.
How'd he take it?
That night, Earl tied me up. Earl raped me. I've been through a lot, but that was one of the worst experiences I've ever had in my life.
Earl's behavior is typical of a deluded personality. His twisted belief system makes him self-destructive, and if Melissa doesn't get away from him, he's gonna take her down too. Melissa knows that she has to get the kids out of that situation, so she makes a deal.
I literally get on my knees and I beg this man. I said, listen, I will stay with you. I will love you forever. Let the kids go. Just let the kids go.
Earl agrees to take her children to her sister's home, and Melissa honors her pledge to stay with Earl. But not far into the road trip, he develops the paranoid belief that the police are tracking their rental car. Paranoia and ideas of being persecuted are common delusions, and they can lead to completely irrational behavior. Earl decides to abandon the car and continue their journey on foot. Ironically, that's the very thing that attracts the attention of police.
This highway patrolman, he pulls us over. And he says, you can't walk on a state highway in the state of Florida. He says, why don't I give you all a lift to the county line? Earl's sitting beside me, and he's got a pistol. He's got it right there in his coat pocket. And I'm thinking, what can I do? If I say anything to this man, Earl's gonna shoot him. How can I let this man know that he needs to stop this now?
It's an unthinkable dilemma. Would you have had the courage to speak up? Had she done so, Melissa might have prevented the tragedy that followed. However, Earl might have killed both her and the highway patrolman. There's no doubt in my mind that's exactly what he would have done. The highway patrolman drops Melissa and Earl at the county line, completely unaware of his narrow escape from Earl's violent paranoia.
Finally, we're in this residential area. And he says, we're gonna have to take somebody's car. We're gonna have to rob somebody and take their car.
They approach the home of 84-year-old Maud Bailey and her caretaker, 57-year-old Alice Durfee.
The lady answers the door, and all I remember is him slamming the door open, yelling at the lady who answered the door to get in the house, get back, get back, get back. I remember opening the refrigerator. And I hear a gunshot. I thought, oh my God, he just killed somebody. That's what I thought, because I knew then that somebody had died.
Risking a murder charge to steal a car makes no sense to a normal criminal. But in Earl's deluded state, he thinks he's the subject of a nationwide manhunt, and that makes him desperate and far more dangerous.
I leave the house. When I'm outside, I hear another gunshot. Next thing you know, he's yelling at me to get in the car, get in the car, get in the car.
They flee north for Canada, but border authorities discover a gun linked to the double murder hidden down the front of Melissa's underwear. Her new nightmare begins. Melissa's charged alongside Earl with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Both are sentenced to life without parole.
I want you to imagine that I am Earl. What would you like to say to me?
That you are the personification of evil, and I hate you for what you've done.
Delusions are a false perception, a false belief, but they're very, very strong. One type of delusion is grandiosity. People with delusions of grandeur can be impossible to live with, and I just described Paige Conley.
Very intelligent, almost scary intelligent. She played off the fact that she was smarter than pretty much everybody in the room a lot of the time.
Independence, Kentucky. Paige Conley's problems begin at 16 when her parents divorce. Her grades suffer. She starts smoking, drinking, and skipping school.
She was just sort of going wild, off the tracks. And my mother felt like the divorce was ruining Paige's life. That she had let her down, that my father had let her down.
Her older sister, Ginger, says Paige took advantage of her mother's guilt.
No one was going to control her. She was going to live her life to the fullest, and anybody who got in her way was going to pay for it.
Paige plays on her mother's guilt. She even claims the divorce left her with mental issues. The doctors do not agree with her, but Paige decides to self-medicate with prescription medications and alcohol. The years of substance abuse take their toll. By 30, Paige is broke and back living with her mom. But the women constantly argue. Sometimes things turn violent.
Mom called me and she was hysterical, crying. And she says, I need you to come over here. She keeps hitting me and I can't make her stop. My mother was cowering upstairs in her room, bloody, beaten, big chunks of hair ripped out of her head.
Carlene refuses to press charges against her daughter. That night, Ginger stays at the house to ensure that Paige does not return.
I actually slept with a gun under my pillow. There was no way I was letting this crazy woman, who happened to be my sister, back in the house.
But Paige's delusions of grandeur demand that she always gets her way, and she knows exactly how to manipulate her mother. To her sister's dismay, after a few days, Carlene takes her back.
And she started crying, and she just said in this really sad voice, you know, what do you want me to do? She's like, my child. I can't not take care of my child, and she has no one else.
There was no punishment. This emboldened Paige. At this point, Paige was on an unstoppable spiral down. March 14th, 2015. Paige Conley makes a distraught call to 911. The operator can barely make out what she's saying.
911, what is your emergency? Someone just burst in my house. I heard my mom. Okay, someone did what? They burst in my house. Someone broke in your house? My mom.
Police arrived to find Carlene dead on the kitchen floor with multiple stab wounds and Paige covered in blood. She initially claims she woke up from a nap to find her mother had been murdered.
You found your mother dead, covered in blood.
I don't care if it's on. She's the last person that actually ever believes in this phone.
But there's no forced entry and no evidence anyone else has been in the house. Later that night, Paige changes her story and claims to have no recollection of her mother's death.
You know that you can remember this. You remember every single thing about today. Except there's this one section that
where I lost the most important person in my life.
I know, and I want to know why this happened.
And I don't know what happened, so I don't know what you want me to tell you. There's nothing that's going to change, but what I can tell you that I don't know what happened.
Paige stabbed her mother 77 times, but that wasn't enough. Then she bit her. Unbridled savagery. This woman should never be released.
The most shocking thing, I think, is that when Paige answered the door, her whole face was covered with blood, but it was my mother's blood because she'd been biting her.
Don't you feel like you have some kind of obligation to your family to explain what happened?
A, they won't care. B, they'll never...
They're not going to care that your mom's dead?
I didn't say that. They're not going to care as to what I say did or did not happen. They don't like me. They don't trust me.
In 2017, Paige is sentenced to 27 years in prison for murder. But 2 years later, an appeal court rules her mental health evaluation was unfair. And through a plea deal, her sentence is reduced to 20 years.
Paige is very self-absorbed, always was. And somewhere along the line, she went from being an odd little child to just a mean, hateful narcissist and angry, bitter about who knows what.
Matricide, killing one's own mother, is very, very rare, especially for a girl. People that do it are very, very dangerous. Sabrina Quide did not kill her mother, but her delusions were just as deadly. In Wimbledon, England, in 2011, 29-year-old Sabrina Quide is living the dream.
Sabrina appeared to be a rather glamorous, fashionable woman about town, an aspiring fashion designer. She wanted to live the high life.
The new man in her life, Mark Walton, makes that dream come true.
He was a very successful music producer, so they were living a pretty high life at the time.
Once Sabrina is pregnant, their future together seems assured, until she starts making wild accusations against Mark. She's convinced he's bringing male prostitutes home and sets up surveillance cameras to catch him.
What Sabrina said was clearly not true. It was clearly delusional.
Once a delusion is developed, it's impossible to quell it without psychiatric intervention that probably would include medication. Left unchecked, things are only going to get worse.
Sabrina's aggressive and violent behavior eventually contributed to a breaking down of the affair.
After 2 tumultuous years, Sabrina and Mark split up. Sabrina takes their newborn son and does what she's always done after her failed relationships. She retreats into the arms of 30-year-old Sam Maduni.
Sam was there for the whole time, and when Sabrina would come and go, he would wait for her to come back, and they would just restart their relationship as it was before.
By January 2016, Sabrina has had a second child with another lover and is back with Sam raising both children. The couple hire French au pair 20-year-old Sophie Leonette as a live-in nanny.
She came over to the UK because she wanted to improve her English, she wanted to study, and initially Sabrina treated her a little bit like a member of the family, maybe even like a daughter.
But Sabrina cannot let go of her delusions about Mark Walton. She believes he's stalking her and makes a string of outlandish reports to police.
She claimed he had flown a helicopter over their house, sort of a surveillance operation. She suggested that he had broken into their home in the middle of the night, and she also suggested that he might have interfered with their family cat. All of these allegations were, of course, untrue.
In fact, Mark never owned a helicopter, and Sam and Sabrina did not own a cat. Increasingly paranoid, she becomes convinced that her sweet nanny is having an affair with her ex and has become his spy in Sabrina's home.
Sabrina believed that those two were in it together, plotting against her. The paranoia was spiraling out of control.
Sam is swept up in Sabrina's delusional vortex.
This was a warped relationship between the two of them. They had both become controlling, dominant, violent, and volatile.
Together, Sabrina and Sam conduct a series of interrogations over 12 days, each one more brutal than the last. They're demanding Sophie confess to having an affair with a man she never met and confess to crimes never committed.
She was beaten with some electrical cord. She was slapped. She was clearly subjected to some serious violence. She suffered injuries, including 5 broken ribs and injuries to her breastbone. And eventually they started to record these interrogation sessions. The recordings are truly awful when you hear them, because Sophie is just being subjected to horrible violence, and there's nothing you feel that she could do about it.
The last time Sophie is seen alive, she is a shell of the beautiful young girl she once was, full of hopes and dreams. She is utterly broken. Eventually, she tells Sabrina exactly what she wants to hear.
Sophie admitted to the collaboration with Mark Walton. It was purely out of despair and frustration. She admitted it so that the questioning would stop.
But now that Sabrina has her confession and the recorded evidence to prove it, Sophie is of no further use. On September 19, 2017, Sophie's torment does come to an end, but not the way she'd hoped.
Ultimately, she was put into the bathtub and pushed under the water.
Sam's attempt to incinerate the body in a backyard bonfire is thwarted when neighbors call the fire department, and authorities soon recover Sophie's remains.
There was a lot of damning evidence against this couple, not least the recordings that they themselves had made.
In 2018, Sabrina Quide and Sam Meduni are both convicted of murder and must serve a minimum of 30 years.
Sabrina Quide is a volatile individual, a killer, and somebody who is clearly suffering fanciful and fantastic delusions.
Delusional people rarely seek treatment on their own. Why would they? They don't know it's a delusion. It's a belief. Just like the sun comes up every morning. They're just like you or I, and that's why they're dangerous. Get too close, and you risk being swept into the vortex of their alternate reality. And there's no coming back.